All right, welcome. So I'm Ricky. This is Eve. We're the tender trainers. So we help subcontractors with their tenderings, and basically our goal is to help you make this process as simple and successful as possible, so you can win those bigger contracts with less stress. We try and do this on a regular basis, right, Eve?
Yeah,
So
weekly. We're trying for
yeah,
weekly.
so jump on, ask a question, or DM us anything you feel like would be good to cover. Okay, should we get into it? So the topic that we've chosen this week is on cash flow. So how does cash flow affect you? And we've got 6 mitigation measures to ride the bumps of cash flow pressures, right? So I want to start with what I would probably call a hard truth that you may or may not be aware of as a
Ooh.
subcontractor. And that is you are cash flow negative on projects, particularly at the start of the projects. What does it mean? It means you're paying for your expenses before you're getting paid. And this is standard on commercial projects, isn't it, Eve? So you're paying for your labor, potentially some materials, subcontractors before you get paid by the main contractor. Yeah?
Yeah, that's standard. I mean, there's some exceptions where you may be able to arrange, like if you're having something manufactured or if something is a very heavy upfront cost where you may be able to negotiate that into the contract. But
Yeah,
generally speaking, that's not standard.
That's it. So we're going to talk a bit more about that. That's going to be some of the steps. I'm going to tell you another hard truth just quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, subcontractors are cash flow negatives on projects. And the reason is so main contractors can be cash flow positive.
Ouch.
Ouch. It's a hard truth. But by putting new subcontractors on payment terms that are long, like 30 or 60 days, it allows main contractors to get paid before they pay you, keeping you cash flow positive. Another hard truth, but that is the way that construction operates.
Yeah, so it means our clients, subcontractors, they're kind of in the squeeze, aren't they? They're kind of in the squeeze of having to, with their cash flow negative, the main contractors are cash flow positive. And so they're always in this kind of squeeze position. So what can we do to help them?
Exactly. So I've got a few different ideas that can help you with this. We're going to call them mitigation measures, and we've got 6 things to talk about. So let's talk about the first one. So the first one, the first one I've got here is putting your suppliers on the longest payment terms as possible, or negotiating different kind of payment terms, part payments with suppliers. So this could be your material supplier, where they are on 30 days paid after invoice, or payment plans after invoice, etc. But really pushing out those materials, pushing out the subcontractor payments that might be working for you as long as possible. Seems pretty simple, right? As well as that, obviously paying those invoices as late as possible. So really giving yourself the chance to get paid from your client before your outgoings go out, or leaving that time as minimal as possible.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're advocating that you always pay your suppliers on time.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's not as late as possible outside of what's the date on the invoice, because we know construction is about relationships. You never know when someone might be able to get you out of a jam because you've always been really great to them and you've always made sure that everything's paid on time. So we're always advocating paying your suppliers on time, definitely. But if the date on the invoice isn't for 30 days, then maybe pay it closer to the 30 days.
Yeah, exactly. And no harm in asking if they have longer payment terms, for example, as well. That might help you understanding what they do have available. Okay, so we'll go on to our next point. Point number 2. So you touched on this already, Eve, but point number 2 is negotiating with the client alternate payment terms. So I can give you a few examples, and I'd like to hear your side as well, having worked as QS for main contractors, Eve. But a few things that I've seen on jobs. One is I've seen main contractors when you've asked them to reduce payment terms, so go from 60 to 30 days. And I've also seen main contractors go to 15-day payment terms when asked from 30 days. This is negotiable. Before you sign the contract, is worth an ask.
I would ask every time, and I would understand that you're probably going to be declined more often than not, but it's totally worth an ask. I would ask every time, but accepting that sometimes some main contractors just
will be a no.
They'll never budge, and it doesn't matter who you are or why. Others might be a bit more flexible, especially if you can give them some clear reasoning around why that would be suitable for you, especially if you can kind of demonstrate that, for example, you need to buy a lot of materials up front, or so I would always ask those kinds of questions.
Absolutely. The other thing that I've seen in contracts from my personal experience is where a portion of materials are paid up front as well. So I've seen 50% of material value paid on order. I've seen that written into contracts. So you're getting a lump sum payment for materials as part of the contract, helping you with your cash flow. Yeah. And along the same line with materials, I've had in the contracts where vetted materials or materials that are on site, i.e. materials that are in your possession.
Vested,
vested, so being a claimable item in your application. So they're claimable, you get paid for the materials even before they're installed. Again, helping with the cash flow.
Exactly. Yeah. So a few things that you can ask about. Yeah, definitely. So a few things that you can ask about. So the payment terms in terms of how many days following invoice, and kind of like the terms of like what can be applied for. So can I apply for materials once they arrive on site, before, even if they're on site before the works are done? That's a really good way to kind of be able to speed up that, because you could have materials arrive at site and you might not do the actual works on those materials for 30 days. So if they're not being paid for until they're installed, then again, that's a cash flow lag, isn't it? Or but as you mentioned there, Ricky, usually it's vested. So usually they will have to actually be either on site or that someone's gone and inspected them. So a lot of time when I've seen this might be also to do with like manufactured elements as well, that maybe haven't been received yet, but have been made, that type of thing. So, so what else is there? So we've got another, well, I'm going to let you lead. But yes, both of those are great.
Number three of our 6 is, this one's very simple, but I think truly important, is make sure you're on top of your payments. You're receiving your payments. So really make sure you're getting your applications in time. Don't give any excuses for them not to pay you. Substantiate your applications. You know what I mean? Do what you have to do to make sure that you get paid on time. Don't miss a payment and application date. That one's super simple, but really important. That can knock you around if you miss a payment.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Right. And the best, when I've seen this as a QS on main contract side, there are some businesses that are just so onto it that if the payment didn't come in, that they've got someone in, maybe an administrator or whatever, watching out for it. If the payment didn't land on the day it's due, they're calling me up, Eve, where's my payment? And I'm like, oh, accounts, where's the payment? And they're just so bang, we were expecting it this morning, when is it coming? And I think that's the level that we should be bringing as business owners, especially for our subbies, especially for those who might be having some cash flow woes. That's the level of intention or intensity that we should be bringing to those in payments. If it's not landed the day you expected it to land, give them a call. If you're being paid by, oh gosh, I've just had a blank. If you're being paid where you submit an application and then you get paid, you know, a bit each month, which is what we're used to working with on main contractor side. So like progress applications is what I was trying to reach for. Progress applications. If you're being paid on progress applications, when you submit your application, if you don't receive a certificate on the day you should be chasing that too. So starting to know your dates from the contract, or have someone in your team who knows your dates and is just chasing. Be that person. You don't have to be annoying about it. You can just be friendly and like, hey, I was just expecting a certificate yesterday. Can you tell me when I can expect it? And just let them know that you're not flexy on it. Actually, you need your cash flow is that important to you that you don't actually have flexibility about getting it in.
For sure. Cool. So we go to point number 4.
Let's do it.
Point number 4 is review your expenses. So this is really by refining your outgoings. So reviewing your overheads, for example, and working out what's not needed and whether your expenses, your outgoings can be reduced or scrapped. So simple one, but it's something that we encourage is done on a regular basis, particularly overheads, where you're making sure that you're not paying for anything that is unnecessary. And it does happen. It happens with every business. So keeping on top of it.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, nearly there. Number 5. I'm going to say this is a last resort, but a last resort is looking at obtaining finances. So we know that as a subcontractor, you're going to be cash flow negative, right? You are going to have to find money elsewhere, and you could be doing this via other jobs that are more ahead of the game. So you could be on top of it, but there is a chance that you're going to go into negative territory with cash. So talking to your bank about overdrafts, there's companies out there like one that I know a client uses called Capital on Tap, which is similar to a credit card function where you can also withdraw the funds to pay for elements on similar terms to a credit card where you've got 50 days to pay them back. But ultimately, I think these elements are just worth looking at and implementing for a just in case time. You don't have to use them, or you don't have to pay fees, usually, even if having them in place. So it's worth having them as contingency, even when it does happen. Right. Last point.
Come on.
Is complete a cash flow forecast, right? I do this regularly. We do this for our business. But if you complete a cash flow forecast, you're identifying problems early on. And if you're aware of problems early on, you can put things in place to mitigate it. So identifying them early, have a look at the cash flow by doing cash flow forecasts, particularly of projects, and understanding where your cash is going. You do not have to be, you can be profitable, but still have negative cash flow. So it can still bring you down cash flow. So being aware of it when it's going to hurt and putting mitigation measures in place is super important.
Yeah, totally. And if you understand what your outgoings are going to be and what your incomings are, and if you're pretty clear on it, and it might take a few months to get that really good. So you might miss a few things the first month. You might need to do it on an ongoing basis, whether you're using like Excel or Xero or however you're doing it. But it is a little bit of a work in progress to get it refined and get it quite good. Ricky, you and I have both been responsible for cash flows on projects. So this is something that we're quite familiar with. Of course, we do it for our own business. But knowing, as you said, when it's going to hurt and being prepared for that and knowing what's coming, I think just that simplicity of just having an understanding of what your incomings and outgoings are and really feeling that you've got a handle on it can actually relieve so much stress in business. And we see that with our clients, that it can be extremely stressful, and how much it can relieve it if they just understand what's happening.
Absolutely. And I think with that stress level as well, when you can see that, okay, my cash is dipping to a bad place here, but the next week or the next month, we're going to be back in a better place. That can really help with the stress from a personal point of view as well.
Definitely. And it can also start
understanding where it's heading.
Correct. And it can also
that it might be only temporary.
That's right. And it can also start to get you thinking about what measures you might be able to do, because you might look at it and be like, oh, that's a big dip there. Hang on, let me just check that invoice. Let me just see if I can give them a call about paying them the following week. Let me just see if it's actually due that date. Maybe it's actually a bit later. You can kind of think about how you can help yourself in those situations. There's one that you didn't list, and I'd love to bring it up.
Go on.
Okay, what about retention? Because this is usually 5% off your invoice every month for main contractors. If you're doing works, usually not for labor only. If they're doing retention on labor only, I'd be querying that. But for projects where you have works that are being completed with supply and install type works, you generally will have retention of a really standard retention amount is 5% being taken off the off every single invoice and retained by the client, usually for something like 12 months post completion of the works. So and it varies a little bit how it's done. Sometimes you get an amount released on completion, sometimes that you don't. A really common and really surprising thing, for one thing, is to try and negotiate retention.
Yep.
Try and bring it down, because that's a little cash flow back. If it's 2.5% extra in your pocket for those 12 months or however long the project is, or however long until you get it back, then wonderful. And second thing on that, the amount of times, maybe it only ends up being 4, 5 grand, however much it is, but the amount of times that subcontractors don't reach out to main contractors to get their retention back, and that money just ends up getting forgotten about because it's 12 months later, put it in your calendar.
Absolutely.
Have a way, if you have admin people helping you with invoices and stuff like that, make it their responsibility. Make sure that they have a spreadsheet and they can show you how much retention has been held on the receipts or on the invoices and how much is claimable. Have them tracking it. Do it yourself if you're doing it yourself, but don't forget about retention. It's a really commonly missed element of cash flow.
Good point. So yeah, I think, in summary, don't leave it to luck. Understand your cash flow, implement the different mitigation measures, make sure you can ride these waves out. Yeah,
Amazing.
I think that's it.
Great. Thanks, Ricky. I think that's super helpful. Cash flow is obviously something we see with our clients all the time as a worry, a concern, keeping you up at night type of scenario. And so being able to give a few hints and tips to help that, I think, is super helpful, and it's very relevant to tender stage as well, because we are helping clients to tender for works. They're not going to go in very confident if they're thinking in the back of their mind, how am I actually going to pay to fund this? Can I actually do this? And they're not going to be showing up as their best in their business and for their tendering if they're super worried about cash flow. And there's lots of things that you can do at tender stage that can help to mitigate it. So it's all very tied into what we do with our clients, because as always, we're helping them holistically at tender stage. We're never thinking about just win the job and then whatever. It's all about them having safety and sustainability and secure pipeline and feeling really comfortable in their business. And we just help them with that from the tender stage, and then it just goes through into their business and through the rest of their projects and everything they do, which is just kind of why we love what we're doing. Really, it's so foundational.
Absolutely.
All right, it's enough talk.
Shiv, I think we can wrap it up.
We can wrap it up. Yeah.
Cheers, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Ciao.
Bye.